to the end. I wanted to introduce this gentleman. When I set up Paradigm Research Group and started filing lobbying registrations with the United States Congress, not because I had tons of money and I was going to run down there and convince them of anything, but I was just going to say, hello, I'm here. One of the first organizations that said, fine, you go register as a lobbyist for me was Skywatch International, which was, of course, founded by our speaker in 1991, I believe. He's, right on board. Let's get going. That's the kind of people I need. That's the kind of people we need to do this stuff. And it was important because the people in Washington, the political press, follow every lobbying registration. They want to know who is lobbying for who, what their issue is. This is all very important. So if some powerful lobbyist turns up lobbying for Dubai, all right, they want to know that. So when my lobbying registration kind of came by on their radar, they said, stop the tape. What's going on there? This guy registered on the extraterrestrial phenomena issue and the cover-up of same by the United States government. So I started getting phone calls. Next thing I know, I had an article in the business section of the Washington Post, though I think they reassigned that guy who did that. It slipped by the editor. Nice fella. I think he's doing like remote work in the Balkans. But the point is that it was the beginning of what I could do, which is to get their attention politically through the lobbying registrations. Bill is a warrior, though I don't like martial metaphors. I want to get away from them. They're old paradigm. But we are still in the current paradigm, so I'll use one. He's a warrior. He's one of these fundamental people who've been doing it since 1976, 30 years, right? Keeping going. Been there and done that with everything. Field director, head field director in LA, and several other states. Wherever he was, he would become a significant part of MUFON. And then he founded Skywatch International and created a web presence, gathered a lot of people together, a substantial website. He's done everything that he could possibly do within the limits that he has in his life to advance this issue. He's at the core of the research. And so to have him here at this time is extremely important. And there's something else that is his kind of maybe unique niche. He happened to live in a very interesting spot in California. Apparently, you draw a circle around his house about 3 miles, and you got more black ops guys than you can imagine. Right? They're working in every program. They're up to their eyeballs, and they all get a little nervous, and they sort of hear about Bill, and so they just come and say, yeah, can I talk to you? And so over the years, he just have one amazing story after another. And then recently has been involved in the extraordinary Dan Burisch situation. We don't even know where that's going, and that's why that's not really going to be gotten into much into the conference, a little bit. But so that he's in a unique spot. That's what you have to do. They're just not going to come and put an ad in the paper. You meet them and you talk to them a little bit, and they feel you out, and maybe they'll tell you a little bit. These people are a trap. They're involved in this. They've got non-disclosure agreements up to yin-yang. They face all kinds of penalties, but yet they want to talk. They talk to Bill Hamilton. That's why I'm glad he's here, and he has a standing invite to come back to this conference every year from here on in. Bill?
Well, as you know now, I'm from the wild, wild west. So if you're going to hear wild stories at the conference, they'll come from me. A little bit about Area 51. I first became interested in Area 51 in 1980. There was a story about a radio technician that had been invited as a contractor into Groom Lake, into one of the buildings to do some radio repair work. He was told to stay inside the confines of the building, don't wander around. This is a secure installation. He decided to peek outside the door of the building on one occasion, and he reported that he had seen what we all know as a classic flying saucer sitting on landing legs outside this building. And he also saw some mysterious wooden boxes, all stamped and marked in red ink, Project Red Light. The very name Area 51 evokes an image of military magic and mystery. Area 51 has taken a life on of its own. So what is Area 51? Where is it located exactly? What is the history of this restricted military area? And most of all, what is going on there that has been attracted the public's attention. And it has been popularized in the movie Independence Day. Well, Area 51, also known as Groom Lake, is a secret military facility about 90 miles north of Las Vegas, Nevada. The number refers to a 6-by-10 block of land, at the center of which is a large air base the government will not discuss. In fact, at one time they said this place does not exist. The site was selected in the mid-1950s for testing of the U-2 spy plane due to its remoteness, proximity to existing facilities, and presence of a dry lake bed for landings. Groom Lake is America's traditional testing ground for black budget aircraft before they are publicly acknowledged. The facility and surrounding areas are also associated with varying levels of credibility with UFO and conspiracy stories. In 1989, Bob Lazar claimed on a Las Vegas television station that he had worked with alien spacecraft at Papoose Lake south of Area 51. Since then, Area 51 has become a popular symbol for the alleged U.S. government UFO cover-up. In fact, UFOs have been sighted on numerous occasions, performing aerobatic maneuvers over the Tikaboo Valley, as viewed from Nevada State Highway 375, now officially dubbed the extraterrestrial highway by the governor of Nevada. These UFOs have an appearance and behavior that is identical to those mentioned in classic UFO sightings. The primary difference is that they are observed in flight in a restricted airspace over restricted military-controlled land. Incursions into restricted airspaces usually bring a military response. Unauthorized private flying into restricted airspaces brings severe penalties, especially in the post-9/11 era. In fact, regulations state, effective immediately, commercial and private aircraft flying inside or in close proximity to newly established or currently existing restricted or prohibited areas of the United States will be subject to being forced down by armed military aircraft, if necessary. The military has indicated that deadly force will be used to protect these areas from unauthorized access. If the UFO incursions are unauthorized, then we would expect military aircraft to force these UFOs to land and to force the pilots to state their purpose. However, no one has ever witnessed any of the sighted UFOs being intercepted or forced to land by Air Force interceptors. Area 51 is also known as the Ranch, Watertown, Dreamland, and simply the test site. May have originally been used by Lockheed to test fly the spy plane U-2. Kelly Johnson named the place Paradise Ranch. Kelly Johnson was the founder of Lockheed Skunk Works, had his own UFO sighting in 1953. When his flight test team arrived in July 1955, they simply called it the Ranch. In fact, the secret base was formerly named Watertown Strip after the town in upstate New York where CIA Director Allen Dulles was born. In June 1958, it was officially designated Area 51 by the Atomic Energy Commission. The adjacent Atomic Energy Commission proving grounds became known as the Nevada Test Site and divided into such numbered areas. The name Area 51 originated from the old maps from the early 50s, in which the then unused land around Groom Lake was marked as Area 51. The term was officially used from the 60s until the late 80s. Then the name was changed to Air Force Flight Test Center Detachment 3, which is still the official designation of the Groom Lake base. The restricted airspace around Area 51 covers a rectangle of 23 by 25 miles, with Groom Lake in its center. That is an area of 575 square miles, which is commonly referred to as the box by military pilots. Not even they are allowed to enter that airspace. The entire Nellis Range, including Area 51, the Tonopah Test Range, the Nevada Test Site, and the Bombing and Gunnery Ranges, cover an area of 5,200 square miles north of Las Vegas. The Nevada Test Site alone covers about 1,600 square miles, partially contaminated with radiation from nuclear tests. Now, skipping from there, there are 4 individuals which I'm going to bring into this story, UFO related. As I first went up to the little town of Rachel along Highway 375 in the year 1989, which was 1 year after I had met a man named John Lear, who had told me about a scientist that he knew who had worked up at this facility called S4. And I learned the whole story from John before, as it came to be, Bob Lazar appeared in shadow with the interviewer being George Knapp on KLAS television, Channel 8 in Las Vegas. And then you might say everyone was scrambling to find out who this guy was, whether he was authentic or not. And he became extremely controversial as the years went on. However, almost everyone that I've talked to from a retired military background or some engineering background that had any contact, inside contact with UFO technology, seemed to acknowledge a lot of Lazar's statements as being true. Holdouts included 2 people that were in counterintelligence who thought Lazar's story wasn't true. I contacted these people and asked them to look at, first of all, one of them claimed to have been at this S4 complex. So he knew exactly what it looked like. And I said, okay, here is Lazar's rendition of it. In fact, it's a 3-dimensional projection rendition of this S4 facility. Please tell me if it is 100% in error, 50% in error, what your assessment of it is from your own memory. I waited about 3 days. I got a response. The response came back. It is 100% accurate in all detail. Then he went on to say that he had seen some kind of a craft that was housed in the side of the mountain. And we asked him, well, what kind of craft was this? Sent him a number of pictures. Then he identified the craft. What was it? It was the alleged sport model that Bob Lazar talked about. Interesting. So the story has not yet come to a final conclusion on Mr. Bob Lazar. Okay. I'll have to back up here to get close to the microphone. Here, by the way, this is the cover of my book, Alien Magic, which has now been combined with my first book, Cosmic Top Secret. I only have a couple of copies left out there right now, but I also have a DVD, only a few copies, of a presentation I gave on reverse engineering. And of course, the story about Area 51 we're all interested in, or at least I'm interested in, is this a place where the reverse engineering is going on? Is there a secret space program going on at Area 51? Here's a little map of Nevada showing the location of Area 51. You travel right up that highway 93 and then over on 375, which connects all the way to Tonopah, Nevada. Here is a excellent close-up aerial photo of a place that doesn't exist. I have a place on a smaller scale that looks very similar to this that's in the Tehachapi Mountains. It's called the Tejon Ranch. It is run by the Northrop Skunk Works. And people who live in an area around there have reported also classic UFO activity. It's expanded over the years and has several underground levels and tunnels that are rumored to go through the mountain. There is even visual evidence that you can find on satellite photos of the underground. Here is a recent crystal clear image taken from satellite. And there is extensive construction of runways. I mean, these runways are much longer than you find at commercial airports. So originally, as I have been led to understand, some of the UFOs, the flying discs, were taken to this facility, but they were later moved as they constructed the S-Force facility. Hey, here's a rare shot. Somebody sent me a set of them. This is on the ground right there in Groom Lake, taken during the era when they were developing the A-12 aircraft, which later became designated the SR-71. Look, there they are, all on the flight line. This is a rare photo. Here is the famous black mailbox. And you say, that doesn't look black to me. That's because somebody painted it white. And you notice they decided, this is Steve Mettleton. He's a cattle rancher out there along the Mailbox Road. And somebody thought, well, you know, the aliens don't have a mailbox out there. We'll add that. So they added a drop box for aliens. So if you have a message and you're out there visiting Nevada, if you have a message for the aliens, write it down, drop it in the box. We'll see if you get a response. So we can't miss the cosmic good humor man, right? Gary Schultz, who was a chemist who became very interested in the Lazar case, went out in 1990 to the Mailbox Road and shot this photo of a classic disc with a dome on top of it. Back in those days, this was not a rare sight. This is one taken at night. I saw something identical to that take off from the ground in 1993 on March 16th. Brightest lights I've ever seen in my life. So I went and I snapped a photo of it. Then it started to move directly toward us. That is my wife and I. I jumped out of the truck to snap another photo of it. Well, it was gone. And I was facing a different direction instantly. And I looked at my watch and I said, I think something just happened here and I don't like it. And we left the area. What happened was, it was later than it should have been. Originally called the Rachel Bar and Grill, here is the Little Ailing Inn. We are going to have a UFO campout there Memorial Day weekend. I've spoken at some of these campouts. When this picture was taken, this man to my left, Bill Uhouse, a retired mechanical engineer who worked on the black projects, who worked on a flying saucer simulator both at Los Alamos and Area 51, was there speaking freely about some of what his accomplishments were with the permission of his handlers at that time, maybe from about 1995 through 1997. Now he's dropped out of sight. I mention this because he said part of his story was one of the advisors on this project about their technology was an extraterrestrial biological entity termed J-Rod. And I thought, boy, that's interesting. And he had a drawing of this guy wearing a, and it looked like almost a typical gray with a human shirt, right? Wearing a human shirt. And he would say that J-Rod would communicate with him in his own voice in his head. So I noted this, and he gave me drawings. He gave me a photograph of himself working on a nuclear rocket project underground. And then we have the infamous Bob Lazar. And he says Dr. Edward Teller, who all of my sources say was definitely inside the black projects, took a liking to Lazar. And what they did was pay for further education and training so that he could go out and work and help in the project of reverse engineering one craft out there. So this was the rendering that Lazar had up on his website of one level at S4 where this craft was stored. There were 9 hangar bays in the side of the mountain. I have now gotten multiple other sources who have verified that this facility exists. Here is a likeness, a recreation of the badge he had. It says MAJ, what we call the Madge badge, and his badge number E6722 Madge. Only there's 4 designations at the bottom. One says S4, one says ETL, which stood for Extraterrestrial Laboratory. Dr. Dan Burisch, who I met later, had a badge H6196 Madge, and instead of ETL, it was replaced with EBL, Extraterrestrial Biological Laboratories, which they installed on level 4. And I've only seen B, E, and H designations, but I do not know their meanings yet. Well, this is the so-called sports model. ET anti-gravity craft, all one piece. It's all one piece because they use organic technology. They use a kind of frequency technology. They could put a door or a window wherever they need it. They can make the side of the craft transparent. Had some technology that it shared with the Roswell craft. Here is a drawing that was done to illustrate engineer Bill Uhouse's UFO Flight Simulator. He worked on aircraft simulators before that. He said he was one of 7 people who worked on this project, and he knew a lot about this craft. And he, like Lazar, talked about the gravity amplifiers, about the angle of inclination in flight, and all of these various engineering concerns. Here is another person who I got to know. I finally met him in person. He's much older than in this picture now. He received his doctorate in 1976 in theoretical physics. You cannot verify it. Again, it's a kind of a payola that paid the school to educate him and keep him out of the records, out of public access, no photos in the yearbook. That's why you cannot trace this. However, you can verify he's an aerospace engineer, and his previous educational record, he worked out at Edwards Air Force Base. I have a list of people that I'm checking on that he worked for. It was verified by a retired General Miller. He said he knew Dan. Dan said, yeah, I know who he is. General Miller also worked on classified projects at an area called S9. At S9, Dan, and he showed me his pilot's license, got into a reverse engineered craft, something we made on his first assignment. It was thought operated because he was sitting there, as he told me, in the craft, talking to control and saying, where's the menu? How do I start this thing? And I went, Dan, just put on that device and think it. He said, okay, I'll try that. And he did, and suddenly he heard a slight hum fill the cabin. Later, after learning how to operate this craft, they gave him a mission. Here's your mission. Go to these coordinates on the dark side of the moon. You have aboard ground-penetrating radar equipment of advanced design. This was back in the 70s. Image what you find at these coordinates. It will be recorded and returned. And I said, well, what was found there? He said, extensive structure underground. And he says, and I know we didn't put it there. Later on, he told me of a more fantastic trip he made. And you could choose to accept or reject it as you will. I don't know what to make of it, but he claimed he went to Mars. But he also suffered for this, health problems, and so he retired from the program. I almost got him to go public. His lawyer advised him not to, and 3 individuals, at least one of which was from the DIA, kind of persuaded him not to at this time. This is a photograph of Dr. Dan Burisch, who is not retired from the programs. He is still active. He will retire. His retirement has been granted him as of next year, and he's only 40 years old because he has a heart condition. But he has promised to finish his work before then. Unlike some of the others, I have collected documents showing his educational record, showing that he graduated from the University of Nevada. There's only one educational document I was unable to obtain, but have verified kind of indirectly. I have talked to his mother and father. They both support his story 100%. I have talked to friends. They support his story. Even an individual came by telling us only that his name was George and he was a biologist, and that Dr. Crane, well, he was known as Dr. Danny Crane, and changed his name legally to Dr. Dan Burisch, was a very precocious student and was working on a cure for, it was his dream to find a cure for cancer. He got a little sidetracked because of a little incident that happened in school where he was asked by a professor to sign his name to fraudulent test results in order to acquire funding, further funding for a project the professor had in mind. Then the professor decided to blackball him. And what he did then, well, there were 3 individuals that came to the university, and they said, how would you like to have unlimited facilities and do whatever you would like? However, you would be serving your country, you would have to take an oath of secrecy. And he goes, fine, I'll do it. He was in a very frustrated position, probably not yet 20 years old. So his first assignment took him up to Tonopah Test Range, where he signed his secrecy oath, which I have a copy of, believe it or not. And then he was assigned to Groom Lake. Then he was assigned to S4, and yet they still did not tell him what it was all about. He was assigned to look at cell cultures under a microscope. He noticed that these were unusual cells. He was looking at differences in the cytoplasm as different from that found in human somatic cells. And he asked his supervisors what the origin of these cells were, and they simply told him, you don't need to know. Eventually, they kind of released him from that assignment, but then he came back. They recruited him back in, but this time they had him sit in a room and, much like Lazar, and read all these briefing books, and he could hardly believe what he was reading because he discovered that the cells he had been studying had an extraterrestrial origin. It mentioned Zeta Reticuli system. He was brought back into the project, allowed into level 5, where they had a clean sphere, and a live extraterrestrial entity was housed in this clean sphere, had a special atmospheric mixture. It was very cold. There was something he called the ambassadorial suite, where he could communicate with the entity, but he found he did not need to use this electronic interface because he was instantly in mental contact with the entity and would ask him questions like, well, how are you doing today? And the entity would answer, not so well as a captive here, right? So he said, well, I know this is going to hurt. I have to come in and take a tissue sample. He would suit up, connected with cables, enter the clean sphere, and would extract tissue samples through a vacuum hose. And that was painful, and he knew it. He would apologize to the entity for doing this because these samples went through the hose and up into a container. The container was moved along on a conveyor belt to another station. So they had become quite sophisticated. What were they looking for? The entity had agreed to this because it was suffering from a peripheral neuropathy, a genetic neural degeneracy, and they were trying to back engineer it. And the most fantastic part of the story, which I've always hesitated to even say anything about, but I guess now that Burns and Corso have said things about this, is that he indicated to me upon our first meeting that this entity was a variation of us from the future. And that is why they are here. And this is the drawing done of the J-Rod. J-Rod is a generic designation for this entity. You can see in this picture, and by the way, we had some confirmation from a retired Major Tom Mack, who was in Air Force intelligence, and he confirmed that he knew J-Rod, that he had an assignment at S4, and that he knew Danny Crane. He confirmed that for us, and then about a year later died of a heart attack. But he looked at this drawing and he said, well, I just don't remember nails. But he said this was a fair representation. This is Dan and I at what was our secret meeting place. where we had a board where he could explain his current project, Lotus, to me. And that's long and involved, and I can't go into that here, but he granted permission for this. And some people, of course, and I don't blame them for skepticism. Why would a black world government scientist be talking to me? Well, for one thing, he wants to talk to the world about some of what he has discovered. And for another thing, he's apparently doing this under some approval. Part of something he told me was Project Patchwork. It's like a time-released capsule. Put some information out there and watch the ripples, watch the responses by the public. Here he brought along tremendous amounts of information, including videotapes of his project where he is looking for the primal seed of life that started the biogenesis process here on Earth. And it is not exactly like panspermia, but it is something even beyond that. Dan happens to be not just a scientist, but a very devout, spiritual person. And one time, even trained to become a priest in a seminary because a priest who had some unusual abilities had healed him. He had almost been going blind. I have the article on this, and I have information on this. Here is a drawing that was done by one of Dan's friends, getting information from Dan on an organization of level 4 at S4, where the biological labs had been installed. Here is the map of Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2, because the ultimate homeworld now of these critters who are related to us is on one of the planets of Zeta Reticuli 2. So they have gone through what Dan has said is microevolutionary changes. However, the kicker to all this is a group he has not met, cannot verify personally as a scientist, but only read about in the documents, which is another branch of the human race that we know of as the Nordics or the tall blondes. And that branch went somewhere else. In our far future, Dan does not deny the existence of other native extraterrestrial races. He says that would be foolish to do so. He only admits to me that his knowledge is very restricted and his personal contact is only with one extraterrestrial biological entity. For me, one is almost enough. Okay, that's the end of the slideshow.
Hey, Bill,
Yes.
could you tell people, with your permission, I'm going to show that piece of him talking about his interaction with the J-Rod in video.
Yes.
It fits so perfectly with what you just presented, and I'll do this next.
Yes, you'll hear it from Dan himself because, well, I have a DVD as well as her, and I've given Linda permission to show this because it's a segment where he describes, I guess, the procedure, right, of going into the clean sphere in his own words. Now, I'm trying to give to you words, and I'll miss some things. It's very hard to talk for another person. Could we have the lights up now? We don't need it dark because of slides. And I would like to take a couple of questions, so I have, what, 10 or 15 minutes? Something like that.
Bill, there's been some rumors that part of the operations at Groom Lake have moved to Pine Gap, Australia, and to Southside Farmers Springs. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, there's all kinds of rumors. He asked about the rumors that part of the operations at Groom Lake have been moved to other areas like Pine Gap. right? These rumors have been buzzing around for some time. As far as I know, all operations at Area 51 are still intact. And I think there are other areas and other operations that are going on. One of them, I was told, is going on inside a mountain in Utah. But, and believe it or not, there were some operations going on at White Sands and some other areas that I don't have access to. Yes.
Is Burisch alleging to you that he's been exempted from his security oaths?
No, he's never alleged that to me. In fact,
You mentioned something that this is a semi-official or
well, he's hinted. Well, originally he told me, as regards, he's asking whether Burisch is doing this on his own, breaking his security oath, or whether they're permitting him to do this. And originally he told me he really didn't know. It could be one way or another. I think he deliberately told me that, okay? Because they wanted a pure response. Here's some guy telling me information. Well, is it true? Is it not? I have to investigate this. I have to find documents. I have to find confirming evidence. Well, that started pouring in.
Bill,
Yes.
what is the nature of this being? Is he, could he relate to us? Is he selfish, unselfish? Does he have an agenda? Any of these things? Do we get any information on that department?
Dan says he's extremely mental, unlike the other part of us, right?
So he's very logical,
Very logical, very mathematical.
left brain.
He has the capability of producing something that I would call like a virtual reality. In other words, images started to stream into Dan's mind, and suddenly it appeared he was in another environment.
Does he get a warm fuzzy, or is it just sort of a cold intellectual?
Not cold and intellectual. He got some feelings from this being.
Good, indifferent?
Both. Good and indifferent and even bad in some cases. But this being tried to send to him knowledge of what we will call the Genesis seed that Dan later discovered and first extracted from ancient bedrock in Nevada that is 1.7 billion years old. And he may be onto something, because it's a mystery to evolutionary biologists as to how life got started on planet Earth, because planet Earth, billions of years ago, was not a friendly place. There was no oxygen atmosphere here. There wasn't abundant water, right? So how did it all get here? What made it friendly? Well, I'm afraid that I'm starting to lean in the direction that he's indicating, which is that it is all the result of an intelligent design. Any other questions? I don't think there will be a congressional hearing for Dan, because he got something else he wanted, his retirement. However, he has to finish his project. It is absolutely necessary that he finish the model he is working on in Project Lotus. I don't mean to strain your credibility here, but I have even been helping him with this model, even though I don't feel qualified. I did have some training in physics, and he said he needed that. So he asked me to research some things and provide him a kind of a essay on it, which I have done. He's actually incorporated what I produced into the model. but he's doing all the experimental work. His assistant is doing all the write-up on it. I know I haven't entirely explained what that project is about, but I'm beginning to believe in it. And one of the reasons is that every conversation we have, every contact has been recorded. I've even conversations outdoors have been tapped and recorded. Email has been intercepted. Tremendous amount of exact, detailed, verified after receiving information about this man, his history, going back to the days of even James Forrestal. It's absolutely amazing. I'm astounded. I keep looking for red flags, and they're not coming up. How much time do I have? Does anybody know?
0.
Is that 2 minutes? Well, yeah, I know. And they said everything would start late, but I'm going to try to end a little early here to give Linda a chance. And I would like to talk to you all if you come to my table, but I'm afraid I'm going to sit here in the audience with those who stay, if I can find a seat, and listen to Linda. Because she and I have exchanged a lot of information over the years, and we seem to be somewhat on parallel tracks. So thank you very much.